Welcome to our final plenary session of annual gathering. This session came out of a conversation that some members of the board and I had a couple of months ago as we were looking at the schedule and asking what do we need from annual gathering at this time? I spoke a little bit of a project I've been working on well over a year now, which was gathering journals of chaplains around the country as they experienced various waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. And collating those, we're using them for research, but we've also ended up using them in a number of presentations. That project ended up ballooning far larger than I intended it to because the stories in those journals were so moving and profound and powerful. And because there really became a dialectic in that research between the struggle and the sadness and the profound unending grief that healthcare providers experienced in the last year, and also the waves and of resilience and even finding joy in the midst of this difficult work, finding inner strength, being exceptionally creative, and discovering the depth of contribution that these providers could make over the course of this pandemic. So there was kind of this dialectic, and we thought as a board, wouldn't it be great to hear some stories from our own MHF folks, hear from people in a few different disciplines, and just start a conversation around the stories that we have experienced over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, our lives are bigger than COVID-19. We all have moving stories to share from our work from before the pandemic, and we will have many to share after. But as we think about this year and the fact that every single day, caregivers have continued to go about their work in these extraordinary circumstances, I think one of our roles at MHF is to listen deeply to one another's stories of challenges and rewards. And doing so can be inspirational and instructive to many parts of our lives. Also, sharing our stories gives us a chance to reflect on how God has been at work among us, in and through all of us this past year. So this is a time of listening to the threads of how these stories bind us together, where our experiences are in common, perhaps where they're diverging, and to be in that holy listening space together. We're super lucky that Charlene agreed to host and moderate this session for us. Charlene serves as a holistic community caregiver, drawing from many years of experience as a chaplain, as a conference minister, a teacher, and a spiritual director. I could go on. She has a beautiful bio and has done an amazing amount of work and is a chaplain to many of us at MHF. Everybody said, we must get Charlene for this. Her demeanor and her expertise is just perfect. So we are very grateful that you're here with us, Charlene, and really looking forward to hearing these stories.
Thank you, Kate. It is really a privilege to be a part of this group. I was not previously a part of it until about 2 years ago, and I'm grateful that I have connected with this group of people. So, from our depths, sharing our stories of courage and creativity. Jesus, many times throughout the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, said words along the lines of, "You who have ears to hear, listen." This is not just some generic statement, "Hey, everybody listen." No, Jesus is calling the people he is speaking to and to us and for all time to take careful heed. What he is saying, you who have ears, is for every age, every person, every ethnicity, every language, every occupation. And to listen in this manner, Jesus is beckoning us to do so in an effort to truly hear the other. And this listening includes bringing a deep presence into the interaction and setting aside self for the moment to be with another. It is a form of prayer. The first word of the rule of Benedict of Nursia is listen. All religious traditions place a high value on listening to the Almighty, listening to one another, listening to our own hopes and desires. Our own Anabaptist theology was birthed with the hermeneutic of listening together to the meaning of Scripture. In the 19th century, Danish theologian and philosopher Søren Kierkegaard came to this conclusion when he wrote these words: "As my prayer became more attentive and inward, I had less and less to say. I finally became completely silent. I started to listen, which is even further removed from speaking. I first thought that praying entailed speaking. I then learned that praying is hearing, not merely being silent." And that is how it is. To pray does not mean to listen to oneself speaking. Prayer involves becoming silent and being silent and waiting until God is heard. Every one of us is made in the image and likeness of God. There is a reflection of God in our being, and together we more fully reflect the image of God. Listening then becomes the opportunity to enter prayer as one is with and listens to another, allowing them to speak from the depths of their soul. And that communion with the other is the body of Christ more fully realized here and now. In a few moments, we will have the opportunity to listen to stories shared out of their lives by Tori Bonners and Ryan Kaufman, and each will tell two stories, one of challenge and one of difficulty, one of creativity and hope that they experienced during the COVID pandemic. As we prepare to hear their stories, I invite you to approach this with ears to hear, with prayerful listening, being fully present to Tori and Ryan respectively. To encourage this, I will guide you in a brief breathing exercise prior to their stories and after each one of their stories. Their stories will be followed by instructions for the next segment of this plenary session, and that segment will include the opportunity for each of you to experience others to be in listening prayer with you as you speak. So let us practice turning our silence into prayer-filled hearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to shake yourself. I'm going to then ask you to move into 3 deep breaths, and with the third breath, as you exhale, to do an audible sigh. For those of you who are shy, just remember you're on mute, so nobody else except yourself will hear it, but do the audible sigh. Praying is a full body experience. So first of all, shake yourself a bit, even as you sit. Take in a deep breath and exhale. And again. And again. So Tori, would you be willing to introduce yourself and tell us the first story, a story of challenge?
Sure. Thanks, Charlene. I'm Tori Bonners. Most of my pastoral care experience has been during the past 18 months. My pastoral internship began in February 2020, ended that November, and then I went into my units of CPE as I worked towards chaplaincy. That being said, I think my first story of real challenge was from February 2020 to about April 2021, our congregation lost 5 folks on our small congregation. And not being able to be that pastoral care presence with those families, as we were very distanced, was really challenging. That was where my heart lied, just being able to be present, visiting with those families, and and not being able to do that was challenging. And also just seeing the ways that lack of presence played out into chaplaincy as well. I was at a hospital with a lot of folks that were trying to recover from their addictions, and the beginning of 2021, a lot of them were really struggling. They had fallen back into addictions because they didn't have their support network around them. And so finding new ways to for us to be able to be present with one another when we couldn't be physically, and the ways that that was really hard, and saw it play out in numerous ways.
Thank you, Tori. Take in a deep breath and exhale. And again, and exhale. Again. Ryan.
So my name is Ryan Kaufman. I am a family physician located in Bellefontaine, Ohio, which is West Central Ohio. I am in a direct primary care practice for the last 6 years after about 9 years of private practice in this community. And so basically at this point doing outpatient medicine. My struggle over this last year has really been dealing with people who deal in a different reality. I live in an extremely politically conservative rural community, and I deal with patients on an everyday basis who substitute political views for their own thoughts, for science, and for what they see with their own eyes. Currently, in the midst of the surge of Delta, we still are only at a 35% vaccination rate in our county. So on a daily basis, I see patients who I've guided through a variety of medical crises, who then get very hostile when I suggest that they should get a vaccination or wear a mask even in my office to protect themselves, my staff, and those around them. I even have my 2 nurses in my practice who refuse to get the vaccine because what they know conflicts with what they've been taught to believe. And so it's extremely, extremely hard when every conversation suddenly becomes to just give, here's what the science is, here's what the numbers are, it becomes a political argument. Having people who are unwilling to listen to the science of vaccines, but yet insist that I read their information about hydroxychloroquine, about ivermectin, about the trackers and vaccines, and get these things every day in the office and email. Just very, very frustrating. Over the last month, it's been 4 or 5 people every single day who get the disease after having been unwilling to do anything to prevent it, and then insisting that I must do something to fix them when there really isn't much to be done to fix them. So it's just incredibly, incredibly hard and incredibly frustrating and just emotionally draining to deal with this. And so the struggle of dealing with this month after month after month becomes struggling to maintain empathy for the patients as their poor decisions lead to predictable outcomes that then put us all at risk. And so I think that's been the biggest struggle for me over this time, is just figuring out how to relate to people when they don't make decisions based even on what they can see, and instead are just so caught up in a belief system that doesn't fit with what we're all dealing with right now.
Thank you, Ryan. Again, Tori, what story do you have of creativity or hope or joy?
I think one of my favorite things we did as a congregation was, we called it drive-by communion. And so we had juice boxes and bread in individual bags, and we handed out as people would come by in their cars. And that was a real treasure. Also, just the gatherings that we've been able to do outside, and seeing the ways that people are really treasuring that time now. And yeah, hoping to see more of that in the hospital, and seeing the ways that families are caring for one another, and treasuring one another there as well as they visit their loved ones. But
Ryan.
So in an office setting, one of the huge struggles of COVID is that everything has to be done differently. But for me, that opportunity to redesign things and rethink things has led to a lot of unexpected joys. While in our office, we've been continuing to see patients in person throughout this time, we've also found a lot of very creative ways to connect to patients and make sure they get the care they need. When we first started doing video visits, I was concerned that this would lead to loss of connection with patients, but it's really given a very cool opportunity to see patients in their own environment and to understand them better in a way that I never would have just seeing them in the office. It's allowed us to take care of patients who otherwise might not have sought care if it meant they actually had to come in to the office. I've had the joy of being able to, sit down with patients on their back porch and see their world, and hear what they're feeling, and have time for conversations that I might not have had in an office setting. To see them in their car when they're too sick to come into our office, or even just sitting on the back patio in the office, enjoying a warm, sunny day together, and be able to get them their care in a creative way. So it's, as hard as it was to make those changes, it's been something that has brought a lot of joy, both to me and to my patients and to our staff, as we imagine new ways to do things that would have never occurred to us in the way we used to do things. So that brings a lot of joy and kind of unexpected moments.
Thank you both. We've heard Ryan and Tori's stories. These are only theirs to tell, and we hold sacred respect for their experience by not speaking of those stories other than when Ryan or Tori speaks to us about them. And now you're going to be invited into that same kind of a sacred circle of trust by moving into breakout rooms to share with one another your own story of difficulty and or hope, both we hope, from within the COVID experience. So what we're asking is that you take turns, each sharing a story around 2 minutes in length, followed by some silent gesture of thanks on the part of those who are listening for the one who has shared, And then 3 deep breaths, with the final exhale being that audible sigh. And after the final story, please take a moment or two to identify at least 3 threads that are common, that you heard in the combination of those stories. And when we come back together as a full group, please have someone share those threads in a phrase or in a sentence, and the details of the stories will remain entrusted to that specific breakout room participants, but the threads, which they can be helpful for us to weave together in our lives, a fabric of community and understanding that we better have as a group than we do as individuals. So Kate, if you would break them up into breakout rooms, thank you. Now you can hear me, maybe? So here we are back in our larger circle. Thank you for the sharing you did to each one of you. Let's weave some of our threads together. Who's willing to speak them out? And Kate, this will be recorded so you can pick it up later as well. Thank you.
I can share. It seemed that it was easier to come up with negative or stressful points. Stress has come at a difficult time for our country, and that it seems that politics and hardship have highlighted our divisions, and that fears and self-interest have been in conflict with seeking the common good. From the standpoint of highlights, nothing like separation to highlight the value of connections with people. That becomes clearer, and that we even had gratitude for video conferencing. It's a blessing, of course, in moderation.
From our group, we spoke about the distress that we're having with, as family members, not being able to communicate about different opinions over the vaccine, nor get them to come to an understanding or understand each other. Also, the distress that health providers are feeling right now. I spoke of a story of attending rounds last week, and pulmonologist said, "But what do I know? I've only seen 3,000 plus COVID patients." And so, yeah, so the distress that healthcare providers are facing as well. And then the good parts and the hopeful parts, we mentioned again just the ways that our churches have still been able to provide community in some good ways.
I think the theme of our group was broken hearts, and realized that we probably never really did do the gift. But the gift was just just being able to share some tears and to share some stories and to be together in that place of sort of lament and accepting that we cannot know the will of God, we cannot understand the whys of all of this, but being present to each other in the midst of it is really powerful.
Our group, one of the conclusions, the 3 parts were that God is present in people coming together and supporting one another, whether that's in the workplace setting, in the family setting, in the church setting. There was evidence of that God gives grace when our attitudes need adjusting. There were stories of how that took place in the midst of this. And a big one was to take the things that we learn out of this and take them forward into the unknown of what will be. And we don't know what it will be. But hope is not about the outcome. Hope is the thread that pulls us forward through whatever the situation is. And the biggest thing I think that was missed was being together in person and worship with singing.
Our group also had an additional hopeful sign that we discussed, which is that some people who have been very negative about the vaccine have actually turned around and started really promoting it as a result of personal trauma and experience with close friends or family who have died. And I've seen a lot of stories about that in the news. And also it was mentioned that one of the major conservative preachers down in Texas has started to really turn around. So when that starts to happen, that's really hopeful. I was reading something this morning that the 3 things that are hardest to say in the English language are, I was wrong, I need help, and Worcestershire sauce.
I think there's a 4th one then. I'm sorry.
Yes. That's good.
It was expressed, and I will say it too, on behalf of our group, a huge thanks to you, Kate, and to the board for putting all the effort into this gathering as you have done, and that being able to connect with one another has been extremely important for people in the midst of this. So whatever this means for MHF going forward, this has been extremely meaningful for the many who have been able to be a part of it.
Well, thank you to each of you for taking a lot of time on your weekends, for all of the board members here and not here who really worked for many months on planning this, and then for many more months fielded a great deal of emails from me. Some of which started with "action needed." That's my tagline. If I need something from the board, and responded graciously so. And a lot of non-board members as well, who've really just been here, who've helped make this possible in so many ways. Really a lot of appreciation. And for each of you for showing up, for being here, for taking time, for taking deep breaths in the midst of this year and this fall. Fall is a busy time. I don't know about you, but it's a busy time. And thank you for taking time out to be together. I hope that by doing this way this year, it just means that we will have built deeper relationships with which we can form and be together in person at annual gathering next year. That is a deep hope of mine, is that we can meet at Laurelville next year. And after seeing everyone here, we'll be able to say hi and recognize each other, not just unmasked, but recognize each other from the heart. And I really appreciate that hope and that thought. And this has been wonderful. I always say one of my appreciations about Zoom, I'm also pastoring for the first year this year, as well as here, is that everybody has automatic name tags. It's great for me. Going from here to in-person and masked is incredibly difficult. I'm like, where's the little tag on Zoom? So it's been wonderful. It's been a great way to get to know each of you with your names, but also a lot more about you and what your struggles are and what your hopes are. I have been inviting folks in my congregation over the last few weeks to take time, whether it's on a Sunday or on a weekend or in the week, to really journal about and think about what they need from church right now. What's the core of church that they need right now? There's lots of things we want church to do and things like MHF to do, but what is it that we need? And so I wanted to close annual gathering and this time together just with that invitation. We're going to be sending out a very short evaluation just to give us some idea of the kinds of directions and sessions we might do in future annual gatherings, for future virtual gatherings. But I also really invite you to take a few moments this week and to think, what is it you need from MHF? What could we do for you that would meet a need, a spiritual need right now, a need in your practice, a need in your life? I have to always give the caveat, I can't promise everything, but we take that very seriously, and we really want to hear from you as we design our programs, as we think about where to put our energies, where to put our prayers in the next few years. Would really love to hear from you. I welcome any other kind of final comments or questions before we close out today.
One of the interesting changes as Mennonite Medical Association and Nurses Association changed to MHF is that we've got a lot of chaplains. And from what I hear, a lot of the doctors and the nurses are burned out spiritually, and we need all the chaplains we can get. So whatever program can be helpful for, I just want to encourage you to work on that.
This is Larry. Yeah, another big change is that so many women now are in leadership in our organization. I go back a long ways, and I can remember the day when we let the women, sometimes we let one of the women lead the singing, but not much else. And anyway, it's just a great change. It's just really, really a great change to have this be an inclusive, gender inclusive organization. it's partly because we're not just all doctors, but even if we were, it's getting close to even in terms of gender in the medical and the medical field. So it's great.
Thank you, Larry. It's true for the first, for a long time, not exclusively, but there was a dynamic of husbands being part of Mennonite medical and wives being Mennonite nurses. And so when we came together for a while, there was a bit of a gender situation with the male physicians and the women who were nurses, and we're getting much more mixed in terms of our physicians. Our chaplains group, I would say, is almost 50-50, male, female, maybe a little heavier on the females, I don't know. Claire is such a presence there that, and so, and even our nursing group is really shifting. So it's really been a joy to see that happen in our professions.
I did ask for prayer this morning for practitioners who are really stressed out. And afterward, I also came up to one of the nurse midwives and said, "You are so lucky. You have 2 X chromosomes."
Well, it is 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon here. It's sunny in Philadelphia. Isn't that a TV show? Something about it's always sunny in Philadelphia. It's not actually. It rains a lot here and it rains really hard. But right now it's sunny. I hope where you are, it's either sunny or cozy in some way. And I invite you to head into the rest of your afternoon. Thank you for being here from near and far. And we will be sending that evaluation, and do watch. We have programs planned for the fall, as well as heading into winter. Please do watch for those. If you have ideas for programs, we're always happy to hear them. And also watch for the fall membership campaign that will be coming out shortly. Have a wonderful day, everyone.